the number, and you'll have to accept that to stay on the call, folks. So you'll see something pop up on your screen. Due to the number of the people on the call, all mics will be muted, and this will be kind of a webinar format, except during the brief breakout we'll orchestrate when you'll have the chance to meet 3 other leaders and talk about what your churches are going through or what you are. It's a chance to meet on a peer-to-peer basis and build some relationships as well. So of course you'll be sent into those breakout groups. They'll come back automatically after just 15 minutes. So we have some questions for you. We'll go over those before we send you away. We will be posting information and links in the chat box. If you're new to Zoom, you can access at the bottom of your screen where it says chat. If you can access that, a chat box will come up on the right-hand part of your screen. If you have a question, you can type it there, but we ask you to primarily just keep track of your own questions and then put them in at the end, because we'll provide a Q&A time in an overtime session at the very end. For those of you who want to get around, want to hang around a little bit afterwards, all of our presenters have agreed to stay over just a little bit and deal with some of the questions that come up. So that is the plan for the day. This hour and a half is going to go very fast because we packed in some things we think will be very helpful for you. And so let's ask the Lord to help us in this time and make the best use of this time. Lord, we come to you. We thank you for all that you're doing midst of hardship in our communities, in our churches, in our own lives as leaders. We know that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, not just individually, but collectively. And there's much we don't understand, and there are skills we just don't feel adequate in. And we ask you today to help our wells be dug a little bit more deeply with knowledge and skill sets and encouragements to be a healing presence in our communities. And pray your blessing on Autumn, on Rachel, on Jennifer, and all who will present today. In the name of Christ, amen. Carlos, I didn't have a chance quite yet to see if Lynn has been able to join us. Have you been able to notice? Lynn, are you on? That's a long list of people to work through. I know, oh, here we go. And so I need to unmute Lynn, or perhaps Carlos, you can. We are trying. There we go.
Lynn, you got to accept unmute on your screen.
Okay, thank you. I tried to do that before and it said you had to let me do it. And so.
Right, Lynn, thank you for joining us. And I just wanted to introduce you, everybody. This is Dr. Lynn Joes. He's professor of Old Testament at the seminary, also the director of the Center for Anabaptist Studies, and he's going to be introducing today's topic and our presenters today. Lynn, thank you.
All right, thank you so much. We are, of course, hearing that people are bumping into other people who are experiencing anxiety and stress that is something that they haven't experienced before. And we know that it's likely that in these situations, people will be facing increasing levels of suicidality. They'll be facing violence within the home. And we are now looking for ways as pastors to cope with our own anxieties, because it seems that the number of pastors who are leaving pastorate at this moment is accelerating, and almost every one of us realizes that changes are so rapid. We face economic, cultural, political pressures. So the question is, how can the church have the right skill sets? What kind of tools are needed to help us deal with this? And we are grateful to have Autumn Lindberg, an expert not only in mental health, but also in the church, who's able to help us with this. And it was my privilege to work as a colleague of Autumn's, to learn to know and love her. And I have just a couple of details that you might not know about Autumn and weren't included in her bio. So Three truths and a lie. Can you pick out the lies and the truths? Okay, so Autumn is a pastor's daughter and the wife of a pastor. And that's part of what calls for her love in the church. Autumn is a veteran of ice capades and was a professional skater. Autumn completed her doctorate by examining her own life as an adoptive mother and thinking about the way in which the crunch of, have you seen the movie Instant Family? It's kind of a picture of Autumn's life. And Autumn lives in Visalia. All right, three truths and a lie. You can chat the one that you think couldn't possibly be true about Autumn. Well, of course, you wanted me to think that I wanted you to think that she couldn't have possibly been in ice capades. But believe it or not, she's a professional figure skater. And what is not true about her is that she's the daughter of a pastor because, in fact, she's an adult convert to Jesus. And her husband, who is not a pastor, is the person who led her to faith. And that's a pretty exciting story all its own. But Autumn's got much more important information for us, and I've got to quit talking and let the interesting person speak. Autumn, you're on. Thank you so much.
That's a lot of fun. Thanks, Glenn. I really didn't know where you were going with that. So, so yes, that's all true. And as an adult believer, actually a huge part of that story was about this. I came to Christ after my MFT training, and so my faith development has just been a parallel process as I've developed as a therapist also. I just can't detach the two of them together. And so that's what I bring to you today, is that weaving together of therapy and mental health and the faith. So one of the ways that I really appreciate communicating is with images and pictures. And there are so many of us today on the screen that there's no way that I could really convey each of these points without some kind of common language. And so we're going to start off with a metaphor. Okay, so metaphors can do that, right? We just get a picture of something and we kind of understand what that picture means. And so we can start to relate to that, even with new material. So I have a really kind of a fun and exciting image for you. Let's see if I can get my screen to advance. There we go. So I'm going to share my screen with you. Right there. Perfect. All right. Randy, can you give me a thumbs up that you can see my screen? Excellent. Okay, very good. So I've been really fascinated by SpaceX and all the wonderful things that are going on up above us, above our planet. I'm sure that's probably says something about our desire to escape this planet these days. But looking to the stars, I've also found an incredible metaphor that I'm hoping is going to help us today. When I think back about Apollo 13, if you saw that Tom Hanks movie, they dealt with a tremendous amount of crisis, and there was a huge space between them and their helpers. I'm going to show you a quick clip from Apollo 13. You may be familiar with this clip, but hopefully you'll see it today in a little bit different way. As you see this clip about this moment when the filters have gone bad on the space shuttle and they have to make do, I want you to also be thinking about the crisis that we find ourselves facing these days, whether it's a crisis because of COVID-19 and the pandemic, the race issues, the political unrest, the exhaustion, the mental health decline, the wildfires, and any other things that you've had to face recently. These things are coming to our churches and they're asking for help. And we're having to present ourselves just with what we have today to try to build something new to meet these novel demands of us. So watch this, and after we're done with this 4-minute clip, I'm going to unpack it a little bit further so that you can start to see how similar these two metaphors really are. So Carlos, go ahead. I'll just mute myself.
Gene, we have a situation brewing with the carbon dioxide.
We had a CO2 filter problem on the lunar module,
5 filters on the limb.
which were meant for 2 guys for a day and a half. So I told the doctor.
They're already up to 8 on the gauges. Anything over 15 and you get impaired judgment, blackouts, the beginnings of brain asphyxia.
What about the scrubbers on the command module?
They take square cartridges.
The ones on the limb are round.
Tell me this isn't a government operation.
This just isn't a contingency we've remotely looked at.
Those CO2 levels are going to be getting toxic.
Well, I suggest you gentlemen invent a way to put a square peg in a round hole. Rapidly.
Okay, people, listen up. People upstairs handed us this one, and we gotta come through. We gotta find a way to make this fit into the hole for this, using nothing but that. Let's get it organized.
Okay, let's build a filter.
Better get some coffee.
The deadly CO2 gas is literally poisoning the astronauts with every breath in and out.
Heads up, heads up.
And smoke will not comment.
Go. Heads up, people, look out now.
What's this?
That's what they gotta make.
Well, I hope you got the procedures for me.
Right here.
That's it?
Where is this, Houston? Do you have a flight plan up there?
Affirmative, Andy. Jack's got one right here.
Okay, we have an unusual procedure for you here.
We need you to rip the cover off.
I want you to rip the cover off the flight plan.
With pleasure.
All right, now the other materials you're going to need here are a lithium
Hydroxide canister, so 2 lithium hydroxide canisters, I'm sorry. A roll of gray tape.
Duct tape.
That's duct tape. You need an LCG bag, 2 LCG bags, the red suit hoses. You've got the flight plan covered.
What about their level of carbon dioxide?
It's climbing.
You're saying that they're almost out of breathable air. No, wait a second. That's not what he said. He said we're working on it.
You want to cut the duct tape 3 feet long.
I'll use this arm.
Just use your arm.
It's a good arm length.
Okay, Houston, I see what you're getting at. Hold on. Okay, Jack, tear that piece of tape down the middle lengthwise.
All right.
Hold on, Houston.
While the astronauts appear to have enough oxygen to keep them alive, one thing they have too much of is carbon dioxide. With each breath, the 3 men expel more of the poisonous gas into the lunar module cockpit, and the scrubbers intended to keep the atmosphere breathable are quickly becoming saturated.
Oh, shit, I tore it. Shit. Houston, what do we do if we rip the bag? Can we tape it?
They just tore the bag. Stand by.
Which I don't do. Hold it. Should have one more bag left.
But they've still got a long way to come, and they are now working on their backup facilities, their emergency facilities, and the problem is, if anything more goes wrong, they're in real trouble.
So I think you get the idea there. They're in real trouble. Here's how I square up these two metaphors between the movie and where we are now. You may have already picked up on some of these. Maybe these ones you didn't quite catch the first time around. But here's what I've got. On Apollo 13 and our current crisis, we've got all of these things that we saw in the video. The box of stuff is kind of like all the assets that each of our churches bring to the table. We already have some skills, some resources that we bring right out of the gate. The level of carbon dioxide, there's a way that our fears are suffocating us. We aren't able to take a clean breath. The filter that they're trying to build, these are biblical truths. Biblical truths, when we go back to the Bible, we can see that it helps to filter out some of the distortions. Oh, sorry. And the press conference that it was happening there when they had that moment where they said, "Are you telling us that the astronauts are almost out of breathable air?" Well, in a lot of ways, our church is on a very global stage, or like on a stage being watched. What is the church going to do? And quickly the advocate said, whoa, that's not what we said. We said we're working on it. That's what we're doing here. We're working on it. Ground control, that's where we come in. We're going to be your ground control. So our mission today is to give you something that you can use to stay anchored in God's word. We are not reinventing the wheel here. We're going to apply the biblical truths that you already know to minister to this world as it is. We're going to filter out the deception because we're going to show you ways to recognize it. And we're going to hopefully give you tools that you can disciple the Christ followers in your churches and communities. And who knows, maybe even win a couple of souls. Now, I can give you all of this, but you're going to have to build it. You're going to have to fit it to your style, and you're going to have to be willing to improvise. That's what those astronauts did up there when they wrecked the bag. They had to come up with another way. If you get nothing else from today, here's our mantra. Start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. That's going to be enough at the end of the day. I have to believe that it is. Now, the title of our talk today is about new skills for a new era. I want to anchor those new skills, though, in old rules. Now, here, I'm going to explain what I mean by rules, because really what we're asking for here is wisdom. We want to know what to do. What skills do we need to face these complex life realities? We just listed all kinds of crises. These truths are going to have to stand up regardless of what crisis we're facing. As you listen to these next rules that I'm going to set out for you, I want you to be mindful that there's a parallel process here. God will often soften our hearts to allow us to hear truth in one of our roles, not quite the other ones just yet. Oh, I get this as a pastor. As a father, I don't know, but as a pastor, that's okay. Wherever these truths can fit for you, let them in, let them impact you. What I've seen is that gradually they will filter out through other parts of you, and they will help to minister to other roles that you play. So it's okay if you can only see it as a pastor or a leader or as a peer on a work team together, or as a parent, this makes sense, or even as a child of God. Doesn't matter where the inroad is. All roads lead back to the center of the park, which is where God wants you to get these truths in you deeply. Now, when I said rules just a second ago, we have to recognize what's going on all around us, or we're going to be constantly surprised. There is a fair amount of suffering that's going on anyway, and when we're shocked by it, our suffering is worse. So that's why sometimes we worry, because we think that we can make it a little bit better if we can anticipate what's about to happen. That's actually what we're trying to go after, is to reduce some of the suffering of the shock of something happening. But there's another way. We don't have to worry. We can actually identify what we have seen to be true over and over again so that we're not so surprised. So you could call them rules. I don't want to think of them as laws really so much as don't be surprised when this is what you find. So let's try it out, right? Don't be surprised when long-term planning now means about 2 weeks. This used to be really funny a couple of months ago. Now it's like, oh no, this is a serious thing. This is about as far as we can go. And maybe for your congregations right about this time, you're planning out Easter usually. That's a really long time from now. Yeah. So when we think about old wisdom, we think about Proverbs. When we think about Proverbs 27:1, don't boast about tomorrow, for you do not know what a day may bring. Well, my goodness, we certainly know that now. But what about James 4:13 through 16? And he says, come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to this or that city, spend a year there, carry on business and make a profit. You do not even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord is willing, we will do this or that. And here's the piece I had never heard before this year. As it is, you boast in your proud intentions. All such boasting is evil. There's no punches pulled there. All such boasting is evil. So I've been working with this hypothesis. This is kind of what I do with my clients. I go, so I've got this hypothesis that I've been working on. Does this fit for you? Please shoot holes through it if it doesn't work. But this one keeps holding up. This is this understanding of the flesh. What does it really mean when we have to crucify the flesh? Right now, my working hypothesis is the flesh seems to be when we try to take on God's role. We try to usurp his power and become gods ourselves. Okay, if that's true, then if we boast in how things are going to go because we're in control, then what we're really doing there is wrestling with our flesh. Our flesh is our desire to be God, to usurp God. So we wrestle with our desire to control even our calendars. We're wrestling with the flesh. That's why it's so stinking hard. So let's go to another rule. We're just kind of getting warmed up here. Don't be surprised if people hold out for things to return to normal. Notice this image that I'm sharing with you on the screen. This is the image of a ravine. If you've ever been on top of a ravine, you look out across the ravine and it looks like there's pretty level ground. There's just that pesky hole right in the middle of it. Well, if the ravine is really wide, you will probably not try to jump across it unless you're in serious denial and you think you can do it. Just speed up, man, you got this. It's possible, you could try it. And if you were to jump over the ravine, you're sort of denying all of the sense of depth that's there. You jump out, you jump across and you keep on going along your way. You're pretty much in the same country and you've jumped across and you're not much different. But if you instead miss it and fall, that's going to be a nasty fall. Or you realize you've got to go down underneath before you can come up the other side. Well, then sometimes you get to the other side and you can't scurry up the side, which means the only way out of that ravine is to walk along the bottom of the ravine and wait until you can find a place where you can safely exit. But that forces your path further down and perhaps into another country altogether. What a brilliant way to completely reroute people. So what if things are not supposed to go back to the way they were? It's not like we are the only people who ever wanted to go back, right? So in Numbers 4:14, they said to each other, we should choose a leader and go back to Egypt. I mean, sure, we were slaves, we were overworked, we had a consumer mindset with our faith, but quote, we sat comfortably and ate all the food we wanted in Exodus 16:3. Kind of like how we were consuming all of these sermons and not out serving. So why is that more comfortable for us and for them? Because at least they knew the rules. You see how that was the population, there was sickness, there was a heart sickness, there was a soul sickness in that community, and they needed to be rerouted. That's compelling. Rule number 3, I teach a grief counseling class. So one of the first things I tell everybody is, once I start telling you about grief, you're going to see it everywhere. Spoiler alert, grief is everywhere. So grief is here with us as well. This slide is going to totally simplify that, but you may have heard these 5 stages of grief: denial, bargaining, anger, depression, acceptance. Okay, we're going to go through each of those briefly as I've heard them in our congregations. The whole first year after significant loss, like think about the death of a loved one, you have a series of secondary losses. It's the first Halloween without them. It's the first baptism without them. It's the first time you pick up the phone to try to call them and they're not there. It's loss after loss after loss. We are experiencing a whole first year of losses that aligns with what we know already about grief. We just haven't named it as that. I've heard denial, or we could say when people are trying to jump over the ravine. Early on, right around the spring, when I heard congregations saying, it'll be over by Easter. Or I've heard, okay, fine, we're in the middle of the ravine, fine, got it, no big deal. We're just going to scurry up the other side. And I heard people say things like, we're going to pivot. We're going to do everything we were doing. There's no loss here. We're in denial of the loss. And now we're going to reach a worldwide audience. If only it was that simple. It's just not. I heard bargaining when people would say, oh, I love this one. Okay. It's all right. It's okay. We are going to meet everybody's needs. What we'll do is we'll just offer a masked outdoor service, an unmasked outdoor service with childcare, an indoor service without childcare but with masks, and then an online format and home church. And then we're good. Oh my word. Okay. All right. So that's your bargaining. I saw anger. You may connect with this one because this is not the job you signed up for. It's not what you thought it was going to look like. And then eventually depression. There's no use. We're competing with an online worldwide stage against the very best theologians for the hearts and the minds of our church. Or there's no way we could possibly reach our congregants the way we used to. The way we used to. And maybe this doesn't look like the job you signed up for, but what if it is? It's not an accident, maybe. And those ideas start to shift into acceptance. Those ideas start to make us wonder, there must be another way. And when we're stuck with this, we have to make another way. We have to find it. There's no choice. So we say to ourselves, let's sign up for a workshop at FBU through the Center for Community Transformation and the Anabaptist Studies, because we are going to figure out how to make the most of this. So you're already doing it. The fact that you're here means you're moving through those stages. Rule number 4. This one's going to take a little bit longer because Randy said we got to talk about mental health specifically. There's a ton to be learned about mental health, right? I teach in the marriage and family therapy program. I could go on for a long time about diagnoses and treatment planning, and none of that would be useful to you. Instead, if we think of it as our inner world, our spirit being crushed, oh, well, that speaks to us in the church. Let's see, if we talk about in the world right now, we would be convinced, I was just watching like commercials this morning, that our happiness is really dependent on the outside world. But we seem to know somehow that even if things are really, really good on the outside, if they're not good on the inside, a crushed spirit is really hard to bear. In fact, Proverbs 18:14 reminds us of that. The human spirit can endure a sick body, but who can bear a crushed spirit? It's when we start to lose hope and the will to live, the desire to keep trying, that collapse. That's really hard to sit with. And Paul said when he talked to the believers in Ephesus, you know, in Ephesians 3:16, he said, I pray that out of his glorious riches, he may strengthen you with power through his spirit in your inner being. He did not pray for protection against physical suffering or to change the circumstances. He prayed for power through his spirit in your inner being. Our inner self, our inner world is really, really important. And it's really, really complex. So I think that for the next couple of moments, we're going to sink into trying to discern what happens to the wounded spirit, what kinds of wounds can be inflicted. Because if we can listen to people's stories, if they're telling us that they're hurting and we can sit with them and hear their stories, we can start to discern where is the wound happening, what needs to be tended to. So we know that there are aspects within our inner world that are impacted by our physical, by our emotional or relational, by moral issues, by existential issues, and by faith issues. We'll start off with physical aspects, making this as clear as possible. For those of you who are, well, probably most of you, you can recognize this image of the Energizer Bunny. Energizer Bunny gets all of his power from those batteries. Nobody would look at the Energizer Bunny who took out his batteries and be proud of him going, well done, you did it without your batteries. What? He was built for batteries. That's what he does. That's what makes him powerful. And yet we look at these things like daily routines, sleep, hygiene, hydration, good nutrition, reducing caffeine and sugar, exercise, and our quiet time with the Lord. And we will try to go it alone without these things and wonder why we break down. I just finished doing a wonderful piece. It was a 2-year piece of work with a client. She did beautiful work in all of these other areas I'm about to describe to you. We finished out our therapy. She went along her way. And a couple months later, she called me back and we assessed all these different areas. And then we assessed this one. She had let half of those things go. And she was wondering why she wasn't able to function. Sometimes it's just this simple. We definitely have an emotional relational aspect to our inner world. We are going to feel really big feelings throughout this entire process. And I wish I could tell you that the big feelings are over, that the worst things have already come and gone. It's just not true. We're going to continue to feel big things. They are a normal reaction to an abnormal situation. Isn't that a great phrase? It's not because we're crazy, it's because the situation's crazy. And of course we are reacting in this way. Of course we are. Big feelings. Sometimes we don't think that what's going on around us is actually that big, but it really is. And they are a part of our authentic experience. They're not the whole thing, but they are a part of it. They're a warning sign that something is definitely going wrong. And Proverbs 12:25 says, anxiety weighs down the heart, but a kind word cheers it up. Isaiah 41:10 says, so do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. There is something about going with somebody into this place, into their deep hurts, that brings comfort, just being with them. We talk about stress, being stressed out. Randy mentioned this at the beginning. We're all so stressed out. I got another hypothesis for you that I'm holding with an open hand. I am finding that every time somebody says they're stressed, there's actually something else they're not calling it. So they'll say, oh man, I am really stressed about that talk I have to give on Saturday. I am just so stressed. There's kind of no way in there. They're sort of proud, they're kind of strong, and strong people, they get stressed, that's okay, it's socially acceptable. What if each time we heard the word stress, we shifted it and we wondered, what are you afraid of? What fear is under this? See, it's very different, right? If I said, oh, I'm stressed about a talk I have to give, and they said, what are you afraid of? All of a sudden, there's an access point. All of a sudden, I can let somebody in and they can walk alongside me and we can talk about my fear. While the Bible may not directly relate to the word stress, it has a lot to say about fear. Our pastors are afraid. Our congregations are afraid. Our parents are afraid. Our children are afraid. Everybody's afraid right now. What are we afraid of? Oh, we're afraid of lots of things. In the church, we're afraid that people will leave. What if I can't keep them here? How am I supposed to compete online? What if I'm wrong? What if I get fired? What if I'm exposed as not living up to the Christian ideal? What if my staff won't follow me? Who am I really pastoring? What if our old ways haven't been pleasing to God? We've got lots of fears. I can't tell you anything that's going to quell all those fears right now. What I can tell you is that when you come alongside people and you walk with them in their fears and you deal with your own fears, you pray through your fears with God, He will bring comfort. So how we interpret our big feelings makes all the difference. All the difference. I'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. Moral aspects. There's a moral aspect to our inner world. Sometimes we are crushed because of things that have gone wrong, things that we have done. We have guilt when we've done things wrong, shame when we believe we are wrong, and sometimes we're chasing after this desire to prove that we are not insignificant. Sometimes when we fall short of that, we feel incredible guilt. So this is a new insight that I'm working with right now. So I want to invite you along this journey. Here's where I am right now with it. I think that sometimes we believe that as leaders, we have to be perfect. We have to be the ideal, the Christian ideal. And when we fall short, we can't admit it to anybody because then nobody's going to follow us. So this is how I sum that up. If we believe we must warrant God's blessing through our goodness, well, then we can't confess. We can't confess anything that we've done wrong, not to ourselves, certainly not to other people that would look at us and judge us and decide, well, you're not worthy of being followed. But if we can't confess them, then we can't ask for forgiveness. So we get stuck. Another place that I've seen where this gets stuck, these moral crushed spirit moments, is when we refuse to forgive ourselves. You may have done this. You may have worked with somebody time and time again, or even with yourself. And you hear over and over, no matter how much you go over the laws of Scripture, no matter how much you go over the love of Christ, yes, I know God forgives me, but I can't forgive myself. This one puzzled me for a long time. It just came unlocked for me this morning, so I'll offer this to you. What if we can't forgive ourselves? And let me put it there. If we believed that God forgave us, we could really accept it. Then what if we've actually put our God in something else? So if our functional God doesn't forgive us, then we can't forgive ourselves. If we've made our career our God and we mess up, we get fired. Our God did not forgive us, so we can't forgive ourselves. You want to take it one step further? I don't know if you're still with me, but if we want to continue to stay loyal to that God, then we will hold on to being stuck and devastated that we fell short because we want to prove, see, it bothers me that I failed you. But the God we're talking to is our career, or our ideal as a parent or a pastor or whatever it is. Okay, so that one's a little bit kind of mind-blowing there, but hopefully you're starting to see the buds of some new insights that are just around the corner for me. So there are also existential aspects. I work with believers and non-believers, and what I have found over and over again is that try as they might, try as we might, we cannot generate our own meaning. We can't. Existential means our very existence. What is the purpose of why I am here? And if we don't have a good answer for that, our spirit is crushed and we can't seem to generate it for ourselves, right? Because of what I just said, if you start to make other things your God, eventually they'll let you down. So if your origin is insignificant, then your life is insignificant. Somehow we are watching around us this felt sense of passivity and fear, passivity and fear. Passivity, like, is in what is the difference? What's the point? Whatever I do isn't going to matter anyway. I could do all of these COVID protections, all of this health insurance, life insurance, property insurance. I could do all of this reading and try to expose myself to all of these different people and political views, and it's not going to make a difference anyway. That passivity is a real risk in our society right now. And this fear that, what if I'm in it alone? What if nobody has any control over anything? These are terrifying, this passivity and fear. What if nothing I do matters? And what if nobody's at the helm? Where we want to move to is that what I do does matter. And God is behind this. He is in control. He does things for his glory and our good. We get to the sweet spot when we can tolerate the tension between these two things simultaneously, that what I do matters and God is behind this. He's in control. He does things for his glory and our good. Both of those things exist at the same time. They are both true. It is not oversimplified by just saying, oh, well, I'm just going to be passive. Oh, well, this world is just too terrifying. No, both these things are true. So we want to move people and ourselves into holding that tension. There's a lot of unknowns that come with that. It doesn't make everything nice and clean in a box, but it does something to settle the spirit. And then there are faith aspects. So When I'm thinking of faith aspects, I'm thinking more of what you live for, what you set your heart on. This is what you live for, and ultimately what will control you. So if it's not God, it will eventually devour you. People are going to experience these things in their life, so many things over the last year being taken from them, whether it's been beauty, power, success, intellect. I mean, really, all of these things will eventually be taken from you. We talked a moment ago about a morally crushed spirit. I think that's about when I let my false God down and it doesn't forgive me. But a faith crushed spirit is that my false God itself, it let me down. This thing that I put all my heart on has let me down. So that's a slight difference there. There's a more sadness in this one and more guilt in the other one. Feels different. So I mentioned to you, don't be surprised that our inner world is complicated. We have a physical aspect, an emotional, relational aspect, a moral aspect, an existential aspect, and a faith aspect. Super complicated. Can you see how important it is to listen to the story or the context so that you know which part of the inner world is in need of ministry and what kind of support is needed? But did you see that when we started to pull apart each one of those places, we can very clearly see that not only the church as a whole, but the individual people within the church have a role to play. And you probably already bring things to the table to help offer real resourcing at every one of these stages or every one of these aspects, right? You actually have an intervention point there, but it's nuanced and there's an art to it. And you're going to come alongside them and not know what to do, but come alongside them anyway. All right. That was the lion's share of it. Now we're going to pick up some speed. Rule 5, don't be surprised when isolation distorts reality. In therapy, we talk about these as cognitive distortions. But remember, in the very beginning, in Genesis 2:18, the Lord God said, it is not good for man to be alone. Now, I was giggling with my husband about this morning. Can you imagine what Adam was doing before Eve came along? And God just kind of went, it's not good for him to be alone. I mean, we don't even let him out of the house with a striped plaid something or other shirt, right? So I can just imagine what he was doing before she ever came around. It distorts our reality when we're all by ourselves. We're not supposed to be all by ourselves. And so you may see this in people too. You may see these distortions, and it's really helpful to identify them and name them. It helps to anchor you, to anchor your reality too. I'm going to share with you each of these and give you kind of an explanation that hopefully fits your world right now. So we polarize, that's what the cognitive distortion is called, when we see something as really all good or all bad. But lately it's been all bad. We're polarizing when we say 2020 was a complete dumpster fire. We overgeneralize by applying one fact to an entire category. So we might say, oh, my Zoom call just crashed, so I must be terrible at technology. We catastrophize and our worries escalate when we say things like, our country is going to be completely ruined if, and then you just insert your latest fear right there from any of, I'm sure, the news media is. I hear it a lot, the catastrophizing. We personalize when we take things personally that are not. She didn't email me right away, so I must have upset her. Maybe, or maybe she's dealing with a whole lot of stuff right now. And finally, we mind read when we assume that we know what others are thinking without checking it out. So the first step when we notice that there might be something going on here is when all of a sudden a thought that we had, a way that we interpreted our reality, escalates it really quick. These all do that. They escalate things really quick. They are just fuel on a fire. It takes very little of this to get you spinning. But if you can identify, that was a cognitive distortion. You may not even be able to name which one it was. You can name it and go, that just doesn't fit, man. That's not real. And then you can say, you can imagine what's an alternative explanation for what just happened. We start to loosen it up a little bit. when we recognize that there are other possibilities, we can reality test. You know what, maybe she's not mad at me. Maybe I'll just call her and check in with her and see what's going on. It breaks the stronghold that deception had on you. And it reinstates a sense of humility. Maybe I don't know what's going on here. See how you have a pull to want to know what's going on? I have asserted it. And to escalate it, to try to explain these big feelings that I have inside. No, you have big feelings inside because you're scared. And this is scary. And you just went in for your COVID test and you're not sure if what kind of result you're getting back. And so you're catastrophizing, which makes it bigger. So you get somebody around you to go, put those gravity boots back on you, ground you. We do that really well in community. Community is kind of an important thing to reality test, even, by the way, on the psych ward. When early on in my training, I remember the story of folks sitting around on a psych hospital ward where they were having a group therapy session, and these clients all had psychosis, they had schizophrenia, and their rule around the around the campfire was to sit around, and if somebody started to talk in a nonsensical way, everybody had permission to say, hey buddy, that's crazy talk. So you got reality testing from your community. There's a lot to be said about that. We'll talk about that more in a minute too. Here's another rule for you. Here's a rule that's actually set out from our society, which puzzles us so much because we believe on some level that as human knowledge grows, life will get better. I have couples that do this all the time. They come in and they go, I think it's just a communication issue. Once we know more about each other, it'll be fine. We'll do what is right because we're good people. Oh no, that's just no, it's not true. Don't be surprised when our human nature is bent towards sin. Okay, all right. So I got a heads up from Randy. So the idea there being, don't be surprised when we storm the Capitol because we are bent on sin. We're going to do bad things to each other. And I mentioned to you community. So we will be tempted to abandon one another. Don't be surprised. We're tempted to abandon one another. Community like the one I just described can reality check us. Community can encourage us in a way that we can't encourage ourselves. Community can lighten our burdens and it can multiply our appreciation of beauty. When we share with other people what we're going through all along the way and then it turns, we get to share and celebrate that with each other. Community is really important. When we commit to one another in a community that will not discard anyone, then we know no one's going to discard us either if we start talking crazy talk. So I offer you these lenses of humility. If you see some of your colleagues acting out in really weird ways, give them these two pieces of grace. One, this is not who you know them to be. And two, that could be me too. So that you don't have a community that is in the habit of throwing people away. Rule number 8, what you say to yourself matters. Our self-talk is the narrator of our inner world. I don't know about you, but Morgan Freeman is my inner narrator. If I get to pick, that's the one I picked. So remind yourself, use these things to remind yourself. We faced unknown risks and circumstances every day before X. Whatever the crisis is, your entire life you've faced unknown circumstances every time you buckle your seatbelt and drive down the road. Truth is, you face unknown risks and circumstances. You already have the skills and capacity to do this. It's already in you. And eventually, this situation or feeling will pass because it always does. It always has, and it always will. Self-talk will help you reduce the fear and get through this moment. This is a magical thing. This is like worth the price of admission. If your children have a hard time, if you have a hard time with plans changing, say this out loud to yourself. Don't unmute yourself, but I invite you to say this with me. Plans change, and that's okay. Plans change, and that's okay. It actually works. Yes, well done. That's your Jedi mind trick for the day. For some reason, when we say that out loud to ourselves and to our children, when they change, we already know that that's okay. This also reduces our fear of changing our mind. Sometimes we become paralyzed, can't change our mind, so we don't say anything about what needs to be done. Identify the solvable problems. There are solvable problems. Solve them. That's a good thing to do. Notice what is fixable, what is working, what has improved. What has went well today? It is easier for you to focus on the bad things. They are stickier. They are. Wow, what is fixable, what is working? Also, what is true, what is noble, what is right, what is pure, what is lovely, what is admirable? Oh, we've heard this before. It's good for us to focus on those things. Here's the bad news. Sometimes you just have to swallow the frog. Mark Twain wrote about Huckleberry Finn. There's a line in it that says, sometimes you just have to swallow the frog. And when you have to do that, you do it first thing in the morning. These are the hard things you don't want to do. You do them first thing in the morning, get them over with. Can you imagine having to dread swallowing a frog all day long? No, just swallow the frog. And he says, if you have to swallow two, eat the bigger one first. It's just good advice. Don't be afraid to change your mind. That paralyzes us. It shuts down new ideas and creativity. Rule number 10. This is the one I want to leave you with today. This is our final rule. You will underestimate the reentry. Do you know what that image is right there? That is the reentry capsule. That's what the astronauts come back to Earth in. We routinely underestimate reentry. When I leave this room today, I'm going to go and unlock my doors because, yes, I need to lock doors in order to secure this privacy right now. I'm going to unlock my doors and re-enter my life that has been going on. There's a re-entry process, and I've got to just kind of hold on and not black out, right? There's no pouring tea during that time. You're just going to re-enter. Sometimes we underestimate how important it is to leave one world and go into another because it's only a few feet away. Don't underestimate that. Pause, regroup. It will save you. Here are your rules. Carlos, if you haven't already, this is a great time to cut and paste them and put them over into the chat window. This way you have access to them when you're in your breakout groups in just a minute. Long-term planning is about 2 weeks. People hold out for things to return to normal. Grief is everywhere. Our inner world is complicated. Isolation distorts reality. Our human nature is bent towards sin. We will be tempted to abandon one another. Our self-talk is the narrator of our inner world. Sometimes you just have to swallow the frog, and you will underestimate reentry. Quickly, when do you refer out? When you don't have the time or energy. When you get that uh-oh feeling, uh-oh, something's up here, don't hold dangerous or scary situations by yourself. Bring along people that can help you with it. When it's a little too close to home, oh my gosh, that's just like my dad. Refer out. When the answer seems totally obvious, you're probably underestimating it. It's probably way more complicated. And when you think that you are the only one that can help, probably not. Remember that that sometimes you plant the seed, sometimes you water it, that ultimately it's God that makes it grow, right? That's from 1 Corinthians 3:6. You refer out to different resources depending on what kind of wounded spirit you suspect and given whatever resources you already have in your church. Remember, it's complicated. Okay. Breakout groups, resilience, this part. Reach out, show up in this breakout group. Never underestimate the power of presence in this digital world. Show up. Be there, be present, be ready for them. I know I've downloaded a ton of information for you. Hopefully some of it has been useful. And I want you to shift your perspective from just passively receiving what I've just given you to, okay, what do I bring to the table? So that's my invitation for you as you move forward and break out. Hopefully some of that was useful. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Autumn. Oh my goodness. There are just some memorable moments in this presentation, and we're going to have to talk as a CCT team about which frogs we'll swallow early in our day. That's such a great reminder of that. So folks, we are going to be going to our breakouts now. This is a chance for you to get to know just 3 other people among the 56 on the call. Just 3 other people, and in this time we're going to give you a few questions you can be answering. Carlos, could you post those in the chat right now? Let me walk you through the questions just very quickly. First of all, take like 30 seconds to share your name and what church you represent, and then we're inviting you to pick 1 or 2 of these questions that most resonate with you. You're not going to be able to make through all of them. We don't want you to, but you might say, I want to share what mental health challenges my church is facing right now, including those in church leadership themselves or members of the church's community or neighborhood. Or maybe it's something that Autumn said that you just want to share again and get other people's perspective on that you found particularly helpful. Or maybe you want to reflect on what you or your church have gone through, the difficulties in 2020. And then was there something good that God surprisingly did in the midst of that or out of the difficulties? Or is there something in your own life that's become clearer somehow in the midst of this crisis, this year-long crisis? Maybe you even want to share some of the stress you're feeling and maybe what fear you're thinking lies at the root of it. Finally, you might want to reflect on what resources you as a church already have or the relationships you have to handle the mental health challenges that are so prevalent. So you might want to actually save some of those questions for later to talk about among your own team. But right now, we want to give you a chance to get to know 3 other people and to vocalize just some of these. So Carlos is going to be automatically and randomly assigning you all to breakout groups. And then this is a limited time. We're going to do just under 15 minutes. So you'll have to use your time wisely, make sure everybody has a chance to share. And then we'll bring you back. All right, Carlos, anything else you need to say about that process?
All I will say is you'll see a little prompt on your screen. All you have to do is accept it and you'll be accepted into your room here, guys. And then I'll give a warning at about 5 minutes and then you'll receive a 1-minute warning before you're all populated back into this large room.
Thank you. And then when you come back, we want to say we have 2 very brief presentations from On-Site Counseling and Link Care, 2 premier organizations in our city that provide services for people who are struggling. And they're going to talk about resources that are available to you. And then we have some stuff to hand out at the end. So please do come back for the final section. All right, Carlos.
So simply press accept on your guys' screen and you guys will be populated into your breakout room. All right. Hey, Dennis, good to see you, man. Guys, make sure you're pressing accept on your screen and you guys will be accepted into your breakout rooms. Okay, there you go. I see a couple of you guys. Make sure you're pressing accept on your screen, guys. There you go. I'm gonna stop recording here.